Have you ever wondered why, despite our most advanced technology, we still struggle to predict the weather just 7 days in advance? Or why a simple blade of grass seems more resilient than a $1 billion supercomputer? We live in a world obsessed with precision, where we are taught that 1 plus 1 must always equal 2, and that any deviation from the path is a failure. But what if I told you that this very obsession with perfection is the thing holding us back from the next great leap in human intelligence? What if the noise, the errors, and the chaos we try so hard to eliminate are actually the secret ingredients of life itself? Today, we are going to peel back the curtain on the binary illusion and explore a future where machines don't just calculate, but they feel the rhythm of the universe. Before we dive into this journey through time and logic, I invite you to join our community by subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the mysteries of our world. For a long time, we have built our modern world on a fragile assumption, the belief that reality can be reduced to zeros and ones. We see this in the glowing screens in our pockets and the massive data centers hummed into life across the globe. We have convinced ourselves that if we can just make our measurements precise enough, we can solve any problem. Yet, if you look closely at the natural world, you will see that nature is inherently noisy, imperfect, and wonderfully unpredictable. From the way a tree branches out toward the light to the way your own heart beats, there is a constant dance of error and adjustment. In the realm of biology, creation does not emerge from a rigid blueprint, but from a series of fortunate mistakes we call evolution. This raises a dangerous and profound question for our digital age. What if our computers have been fighting the very thing that makes intelligence possible? To understand how we got here, we have to look back to a time when science believed the universe was a giant, predictable clock. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, the French scholar Pierre-Simon Laplace envisioned a cosmos where everything was governed by strict laws. He proposed a thought experiment involving a vast intellect, often called Laplace's demon, which knew the position and momentum of every single atom in existence. To this demon, nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes. This vision of a clockwork universe promised us total control, suggesting that if we only had enough data, we could calculate the destiny of the stars. This belief did not just stay in the history books, it became the very foundation of classical physics and, eventually, the logic gates of our digital computation. However, the dream of total control began to crack as we realized that the world is far more complex than a set of swinging pendulums. No matter how much data we gathered, there was always a lingering shadow of uncertainty that refused to go away. We see this in our daily lives when a perfectly planned day is disrupted by a sudden rainstorm or a chance encounter that changes the course of our career. We try to force these events into boxes, calling them outliers or anomalies, but they are the fabric of reality. The rigid structure of classical physics could not account for the sheer mesanisms of life, leading us to a crossroads where we had to either ignore the chaos or find a way to speak its language. In the early 1900s, a Russian mathematician named Andrei Markov shattered the certainty of the clockwork universe by showing that randomness itself has a hidden structure. Markov was not interested in the distant past or the far future, but in the transitions between one moment and the next. He studied the patterns of letters in Russian literature, specifically the poem Eugene Onegin, to see how one vowel followed a consonant. He discovered that you could model chaos without knowing the entire history of every particle, focusing instead on the probability of what might happen next. This was the birth of the Markov chain, a mathematical proof that uncertainty does not eliminate our ability to predict, it simply reshapes it. Markov taught us that chaos could be measured and understood, even if it could never be fully conquered. This discovery was revolutionary because it allowed us to find order in places we previously thought were lost to noise. Think about the way your smartphone predicts the next word you are going to type. It doesn't know your entire life story, it just knows the probability of the next word based on the one you just wrote. This is a Markovian process in action, using the immediate present to navigate an uncertain future. By embracing the idea that we don't need to know everything to understand something, Markov opened a door that would eventually lead to the most complex systems we use today. It was a shift from the arrogance of absolute certainty to the wisdom of statistical patterns. Scientists like Stanislaw Ulam were facing problems involving neutron diffusion that were far too complex for any exact equation to solve. He realized that instead of trying to calculate every possible move, he could simply simulate the game hundreds of times and see how often he won. He proposed this radical idea to his colleague John von Neumann, suggesting that they could embrace randomness to solve the secrets of the atom. This became known as the Monte Carlo method, named after the famous gambling capital because it essentially turned the computer into a high-stakes dice roller for science. The Monte Carlo method changed computation forever by turning uncertainty into a productive tool rather than a bug to be fixed. Instead of demanding a single perfect answer, scientists began to look for the most likely truth that emerged from a sea of simulations. It was the first major instance where we stopped fighting the noise and started using it to illuminate the shadows of the unknown. By simulating chance repeatedly, we found a way to bridge the gap between the rigid logic of machines and the fluid reality of the physical world. Despite the success of these methods, the great John von Neumann saw a fatal flaw in the digital machines he helped create. He realized that our computers were entirely dependent on perfection, meaning a single flipped bit or a tiny hardware error could cause an entire system to collapse. He observed that the human brain does not work this way. Our neurons are noisy, they misfire, and yet we are capable of profound thought and resilience. In the 1950s, von Neumann began to imagine a new kind of computer that behaved more like a biological organism, something adaptive and probabilistic. He was working on a vision for stochastic computing, where accuracy would come from the average of many noisy signals rather than the absolute certainty of a single wire. This unfinished vision of von Neumann's suggested that the future of intelligence lay not in more gates and faster clocks, but in a fundamental shift in how we represent information. In a traditional computer, a number is a fixed thing, like a stone carved with a mark. But in a stochastic machine, a number is more like a cloud, a probability that shifts and flows. This approach would allow a computer to be hit by radiation or have its hardware damaged, and still provide a useful, if slightly less precise, answer. It was the birth of a philosophy that prioritized survival and adaptability over the fragile elegance of perfect logic. In the late 1960s, a scientist named Bernard Gaines took this idea and built a machine called the Russell computer. It was a strange and beautiful experiment where numbers were represented as streams of random pulses rather than binary codes. This meant that arithmetic became a statistical process, where multiplying two numbers was as simple as passing two signals through a single gate. The Russell computer was incredibly fault-tolerant, meaning you could literally cut a wire or damage a component, and the machine would continue to function, just with a bit more noise in its output. It was a hardware embodiment of the idea that a little bit of chaos makes a system stronger. However, the world was not yet ready for the wisdom of the Russell computer. During that era, the demand for high-speed calculation and the rapid advancement of traditional silicon chips meant that stochastic computing was seen as too slow and inefficient for everyday tasks. We chose the path of the binary ladder, climbing higher and higher toward absolute precision. The idea of computing with noise was largely abandoned, left in the dusty archives of computer science history, while we focused on making our transistors smaller and our clocks faster. We traded the resilience of the biological model for the sheer speed of the deterministic one. Decades later, we are starting to realize that our pursuit of perfect control has hit a massive physical and energetic wall. Today, the massive artificial intelligence models that we admire consume as much power as entire cities. The chips we use, like the powerful GPUs, were originally designed for the rigid math of graphics and are now being forced to simulate the chaos of human language. This is incredibly inefficient, like trying to use a ruler to measure the volume of a cloud. We are pouring billions of dollars into cooling systems and power plants just to keep our deterministic machines from melting under the pressure of the probabilistic tasks we give them. Precision has become an expensive and, frankly, unsustainable luxury. As we reach these limits, the necessity of the moment is resurrecting the old ideas that were once cast aside. A new generation of scientists and engineers is starting to believe that the future of technology isn't binary, but deeply probabilistic. This is where companies like Normal Computing are stepping in, challenging the very architecture of how we build chips. Instead of spending immense energy to suppress the natural electrical noise that occurs at the atomic scale, they are building hardware that exploits it. They are turning the hiss of the universe into the heartbeat of the machine, allowing uncertainty to become the engine of discovery rather than the enemy of progress. Imagine a chip where the transistors are allowed to operate at unstable voltages, creating unnatural fluctuations in current. In this environment, values aren't forced into being a 0 or a 1 instead. They emerge from the statistical behavior of the electrons over time. This is a return to a more natural form of math, where physics itself performs the heavy lifting of multiplication and inference. By letting go of the need to control every single electron, we can build machines that are thousands of times more energy efficient. It is a shift from forcing the world to fit our logic, to building logic that fits the world. This hardware shift perfectly mirrors how modern artificial intelligence actually works on a conceptual level. When you use a tool like an image generator, it often starts with a screen full of random noise and gradually refines that noise into a coherent picture of a cat or a sunset. The software is already thinking in terms of probability and variation, but it is running on hardware that is still stuck in the age of clockwork determinism. By aligning our machine architecture with the way intelligence actually emerges, we are closing the gap between the tool and the task. Stochastic chips allow the machine to dream in the same way the software does, making the process of learning and adaptation much more fluid. But this isn't just about a faster chip or a better AI model. It represents a profound paradigm shift in our entire philosophy of life. For centuries, we have defined success by our ability to exert control over our environment and our data. We are now entering an era where control is being replaced by balance and certainty is being replaced by observation. This philosophy of embracing emergence over command could reshape every field that is currently dominated by uncertainty, from the way we model global economics to how we treat complex diseases in medicine. It suggests that the most powerful systems are not the ones that are the most rigid, but the ones that know how to dance with the unknown. The ultimate implication of this journey is deeply human, reminding us that we are not biological calculators, but creatures of the mist. Our own intelligence exists because we have the capacity for error, because our brains are noisy environments where ideas can collide in unexpected ways. Learning requires the ability to fail, and creativity demands a certain amount of internal noise to break out of old patterns. By allowing our machines to embrace chaos, we aren't just making them better tools. We are perhaps rediscovering what it means to think. We are moving toward a partnership with technology where we no longer demand perfection, but effectiveness. As we look toward the future of chaos, the next great leap in technology may not come from building bigger and faster machines, but from humbler ones. We are learning that we don't need to dominate nature to understand it. We just need to learn how to cooperate with its inherent rhythms. In our own lives, we often stress over the things we cannot control, trying to force our messy reality into a perfect plan. But perhaps the lesson of the stochastic machine is that you don't need to have every answer or control every variable to find your way. You just need to be resilient enough to let the patterns emerge and wise enough to follow where they lead. As you reflect on this shift from the binary to the probabilistic, I want to ask you, where in your own life are you fighting against the noise instead of using it? Are there areas where your fear of making a mistake is preventing you from finding a creative solution? I encourage you to embrace a bit of uncertainty this week and see what new patterns emerge when you stop trying to control every outcome. Thank you for spending this time with me today as we explored the edges of logic and the beauty of chaos. I wish you and your loved ones great health, clarity of mind, and the courage to find order in the noise. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the future of our world, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.